I get a lot of questions about dairy. Can I have dairy on the carnivore diet? Can I have condiments on the carnivore diet? I would suggest that you keep dairy out of the carnivore diet, especially if you're trying to have weight loss. If you're trying to induce some weight gain, then I would recommend bringing some dairy in. However, if you have pain, you have inflammation, you feel like you have arthritis, or you have shoulder pain, elbow pain, you got pain in your joints, again, I would suggest remove that dairy out. Even cheese, which can be very difficult to do. And these are just things that you can try for a period of time and then just see how it works for you. And then if it's working really well, you might be really screwed because now you got to figure out a way to stick with that. Condiments are another thing, ketchup, mustard, dressings, and so on. What I'm going to say about that is, if you can find stuff that doesn't have sugar in it, which is very, very difficult. I think like 85% of the stuff in the grocery store, or maybe even more, has sugar in it, then I don't see any problem with a small influence of those things. Again though, if you have issues, if you are someone who's in a lot of pain, or you just have some issues that you really want to try to work out, I suggest going full on 100% carnivore. There's actually some different stages to it of the carnivore diet. I'll just flat out steal a page from the Carnivore Cookbook where they show you there's kind of some different levels to this stuff. And again, I would advise the more problems that you have, the better off you are staying, being as high level as you possibly could for a period of time, which may be very hard to adhere to, but it might be worth it, and it might be encouraging because who knows, in 3 days or 5 days you might start feeling a lot better. Just like many of my relatives have, just a few days they've been able to turn things around. I mentioned my mother-in-law being able to come off of diabetic medication after having it for 7 years, and with about 1 week, 10 days of the carnivore diet, she was able to get rid of all of her medication. That is just absolutely crazy. I would say that things like mustard and some of these things, I would say that, again, I would try to go without them for a bit, see how your body's reacting. But if you feel like you really want them and you really need them, and they're going to help you to continue to get momentum towards going towards your goal, then I would say just leave them in and don't really worry about it too much. Can you have a Zevia drink? Some of these sodas that are made with stevia and monk fruit. I would say yes, you can have those. However, it's just like being in a fight and putting your hands down. Like, it starts to get a little bit risky, and you might get popped, you might get punched, you might trigger some reaction, because we're not really supposed to have those flavors. If you think about it, from an evolutionary standpoint, where would we get that pop from? Where would we get that flavor from? You're not really going to find it anywhere else. You could make a case that you would find it in some like blueberries and some cherries and some strawberries and some things like that, but like, how often would you have access to those things? And I don't know, you'd have access to them for 3-4 weeks or a month or two, and then it would be gone, and then you had to forage for something else. But most of the things that we're supposed to eat, in my opinion, are going to be things that are kind of savory, salty, fatty, buttery, protein-like things, rather than Crystal Light or some of these things. If you feel like you're relatively a healthy person and you're not too concerned about your body weight, and you're not too concerned about, you don't have any issues with food, you don't have an addiction to food, then I would say you're probably totally fine with even squeezing a little bit of lemon in your water and things like that. But if you're anything like me and you struggled with it most of your life, and you have very heavy relatives and things like that, there's a lot of obesity in the United States, and a lot of people really, really struggle with their food. If you're somebody that's like that, I would say the stricter that you go, the better, because it won't trigger anything. Do you ever get a cheat meal? Do you ever get an opportunity to kind of just go for it here and there? I think instead of thinking about a cheat of something that's totally against the diet, I like to think of it as more of like a treat. That comes from my buddy Josh Settlage. He posted that recently on Instagram, but I think it's a great way of looking at it. Have something that treats yourself, but also have something that doesn't hurt you. So how do we figure that out? Well, you can go to a website, you can check out ruled.me, or again, you can check out Maria and Craig Emmerich. They have books on a keto diet. So maybe you cook up something that's keto, but not necessarily carnivore. There's a small difference between the two. The ketogenic diet allows for an immense amount of fat, and it allows for you to eat other things other than just meat. There's snacks, there's desserts, there's all kinds of things. And so maybe here and there, like if you're doing this with your spouse, doing this with your girlfriend, doing this with your family, maybe you encourage them and say, hey, you know what, once a week we're going to have like a keto cheat, which can still be fun. I know some of you are thinking like, this sounds crazy, but it'll still be really good. Like a fathead pizza or something like that can be absolutely delicious. Another area where people get tripped up on this, there's a few things. Sometimes people have trouble with their sleep. Just know that you have to kind of ride this stuff out. And just a small tip about sleep, that something has helped me over the years quite a bit. I spent probably about 4 or 5 years really being extremely sleep deprived, and I'm lucky that that time period didn't last any longer, because I think I would have really slipped into some really tough times. But luckily, it didn't last long enough. Luckily, my powerlifting career was taken away from me from falling with a 1,085 squat, and that kind of changed everything forever. I started to adhering to more nutrition and things like that. But what I think happens to a lot of people is they get hit by waves of sleep. You know, we get hit by like 2 or 3 of them a day, and wave number 1 usually happens around noon, 1 o'clock. Sometimes it happens even without eating, and sometimes it happens regardless of the style of nutrition that you have. Sometimes it just hits you. I think it's just like part of our rhythm. Another time that usually happens is sometimes around, you know, somewhere between 3 and like 5 p.m. Sometimes you kind of get hit by it again, and then you're not hit again until like 11, you know. Something that has helped me is sometimes when I've gotten hit by that second wave of fatigue, second wave of needing to sleep, sometimes I've just tried to get my butt in bed super early. So I've had days where, you know, I get home and I'm kind of feeling tired as I'm eating dinner, you know, at 5 or 6 o'clock, and I'm like, you know what, I just need to figure out a way to get my butt in bed. And that has helped me tremendously. So even for some of you who maybe don't have the convenience of sleeping maybe that early, just see if you could start getting to bed about an hour earlier than what you're used to. And there'll be an adjustment period. You changed your food, it's gonna change every behavior, it's gonna change every single thing that you have going on in your life. Also, make sure you're active enough to actually need sleep. You know, once you start this carnivore diet, once you start to lose a little bit of body weight, when you start to lose weight, there's nothing more invigorating than losing body weight. It really fuels your body, and it feels like, it's hard to really even describe how much energy it gives you. It's somewhere between like a cup of coffee, a shot of adrenaline, and just a huge caloric surplus to your body. I realize that you might not be eating as many calories, but if you think about it, you got a lot of calories resting around your stomach that your body is now releasing. And that is an amazing feeling, super empowering too. First time you hear somebody say, hey man, you're starting to look really good, that gives you a lot of energy, and you just feel invigorated to attack each and every single day. So make sure you're getting enough activity. I would suggest that you try to lift weights about 3 times a week. If you're really not into weights, I would suggest that you just do like 1 or 2 things. Every time you hit the gym, just do some resistance training, do a couple sets of 10 and get the heck out of there. You don't need to spend a lot of time in there. And then make sure you're hitting up a few 10-minute walks every single day. The last thing I want to touch upon is cramping. You know, sometimes people, their electrolytes get thrown off. You're not consuming like large amounts of potassium because you cut out greens. Greens have potassium in them. Fruit has a lot of potassium in it as well. We're also not consuming carbohydrates. Carbohydrates help to hydrate the muscle, and that's probably the worst part of it. So something to be very careful of is that when you do eat carbohydrates, you really need to make sure that you like kind of double up or even triple up on your water, because you will end up with cramps, and it'll be pretty severe. So if you're going to eat carbohydrates, if you're going to cheat on the diet a little bit, then make sure you really load up on your water. But you just need water in general anyway, but you also need salt. So pre-workout, a great pre-workout is just to consume some salt. Throw some salt and some water. You don't need to throw so much salt in there that it changes the flavor. That might be kind of gross to you. You might not be used to that. But that would be my suggestion, is just to utilize some salt. And make sure you're also eating enough food. I think in general, people aren't consuming enough nutrients. It's important that you understand that almost every single food that we have that's alive has potassium in it. Salmon also has a tremendous amount of potassium in it, but beef has some potassium in it as well, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think eggs may have that in there as well. You might even want to bring in some supplementation. A company like Perfect Keto, they make electrolyte capsules. And then there's also something I get off of Amazon here and there because I like to train a lot. I run, I lift, I do a lot of different things. I sweat a lot. And so I'll bring in, it's called Snake Diet Juice is what it's called. And I get that off of Amazon, just comes in little packets, and I use like quarter a packet a couple times a day, sometimes half a packet. But what I noticed with that, and what I noticed with any electrolytes is, if you use a lot of electrolytes, including just salt, that will mess up your stomach, and that will can also lead to diarrhea. So you need to be a little cautious and pay attention to some of that. And then, you know, just again, make sure that you're eating enough food. I think that's a big mistake that a lot of people are making, because I've dealt with those kind of cramps in the middle of the night and stuff like that in my legs, and it's not comfortable. It's absolutely brutal. But one way that I've overcome it is just not so much just water, because you got to keep in mind that water will actually dehydrate you, because it will pull out a lot of minerals as well. You'll end up just keep going to the bathroom over and over and over again because you're not eating any carbohydrates. But you need some salt in your diet as well, so you can salt your meat and throw some salt in your water. Strength is never a weakness. Weakness is never a strength. Catch you all later.